The pressure is not only about bills, it is about responsibility, about who carries the weight when the money runs thin, when plans change, when a need shows up at the door. And deep down, it is about the question no spreadsheet can answer. Who owns your life and who sets its direction? Scripture talks about wealth like it is real, but not ultimate. It can be a tool, a test, a burden, a gift. It can train your heart, or it can expose it. Many people want Bible money wisdom that feels clean and simple, but the Bible often makes it personal first. It reaches past your habits and touches your worship. This is for education and spiritual reflection, not financial advice. The goal is not to chase an outcome. The goal is to practice daily faithfulness. That means asking hard questions in small moments. What do I do with what I have today? What do I do with what I want? What do I do when I feel fear? So we start where the Bible often starts. Not with a trick, but with a claim that changes how you hold every peso, every plan, every purchase. If God is the owner, then you are not trapped. You are entrusted. And that is where real practice begins. Stewardship over ownership. When the money finally comes in, the first temptation is to exhale and say, mine. It feels natural. You worked. You waited. You carried stress in silence. But that word can turn heavy fast, because when you believe you own it all, you also believe you must protect it all. And fear becomes your financial advisor. The Bible begins with a different ground rule. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it. Psalm 24, chapter 1. Israel was warned about the moment success starts to sound like self-made glory, and they were told to remember that God gives you the ability to produce wealth. Deuteronomy 8:18. In the New Testament, Paul calls believers stewards and says what is required is faithfulness, not applause. 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Stewardship does not deny effort. It places effort under a higher owner. Today, stewardship can get twisted into control. One modern pattern is fear-based tracking, where every cent is watched like a threat, and generosity feels dangerous. Another is image-based spending, where blessing is used to excuse upgrades you cannot carry, while basics get ignored. Both patterns still say mine, just in different tones. So practice the older pattern. Start each day with one quiet sentence. Lord, this is yours. Then take one simple step. Track what you already have before chasing what you want, so you can act on purpose. Faithful stewardship is not a mood. It is worship with receipts. Diligent work and skillful craft. When work feels small, it is easy to coast. When work feels unfair, it is easy to cut corners. And when nobody is clapping, it is easy to think your effort does not matter. But Scripture treats daily labor like a serious place. Not because it makes you important, but because it shapes you. Paul writes, whatever you do, work at it with your whole being, for the Lord and not for men. Colossians chapter 3:23. That line was heard by people with limited control over their jobs, and it still called them to integrity. Proverbs also honors skill and careful effort. Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will be stationed in the presence of kings. Proverbs 22:29. And it warns that diligent planning tends to beat frantic rushing because the plans of the diligent lead to profit. Proverbs chapter 21:5. The pattern is not hype. It is steady practice. The modern distortion is loud. One example is shortcut culture, where someone wants fast money but avoids the slow path of learning, serving, and improving. Another is burnout pride, where a person works non-stop to feel safe, but their family and faith get the leftovers. Diligence becomes either laziness with excuses or overwork with fear. Choose a steadier way. Pick one skill to sharpen, even in a small daily block, and treat it like worship. Then add one boundary that protects your strength so you can stay faithful over time. God-honoring diligence is not grinding for identity. It is offering your best without selling your soul. Generous giving and open-handedness. When you give, something inside you argues back. What if you need that later? What if nobody helps you when it is your turn? What if you look foolish? That inner voice can sound practical, but it often hides a deeper story. A story where scarcity rules and love is always on a tight leash. Paul tells the church that giving is not meant to be forced. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. 2 Corinthians chapter 9:7. He also describes a pattern. sowing sparingly and bountifully, not as a formula, but as a wisdom principle about what your hands are training your heart to do. 2 Corinthians 9:6. Proverbs makes a similar observation that one person gives freely and another withholds, and their paths tend to diverge. Proverbs chapter 11:24-25. Even the promised language is not a lever. It is a mirror. The misuse today often comes in two directions. One is fear hoarding, where a person refuses to help anyone, even in clear need, because they imagine disaster behind every corner. The other is performative giving, where someone gives to be seen, then resents people for needing help, and later calls generosity a scam. Both ways keep the heart closed. Start small, but start real. Choose one giving lane that fits your life, and make it quiet and consistent, not dramatic. Then practice open hands in non-money ways too: time, attention, kindness, prayer. If this challenges you, share one honest line in the comments about what feels hard to release. Budgeting with wisdom and priorities. When money gets tight, the first casualty is often clarity. You swipe, you borrow, you delay, you hope. And the budget becomes a place you avoid, like a room in the house you never clean. But avoidance does not remove pressure. It just moves it into the dark where anxiety grows. Jesus used a money image to teach discipleship. Won't you sit down and figure out how much it will cost, and if you have enough money to pay for it? Luke 14:28. The point is not cold calculation. It is honest counting before you commit. Proverbs adds a similar rhythm. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Proverbs 21:5. In Scripture, wisdom is not only spiritual talk, it becomes priorities that guide action, especially when emotions rise. Today, budgeting gets distorted in two common ways. One is panic budgeting, where fear cuts everything overnight, then rebounds into splurging because it felt unbearable. Another is fantasy budgeting, where someone writes numbers that match their dreams, not their reality, then feels shame when life does not obey the plan. Both avoid steady truth. Try a gentler, firmer practice. First, name your top priorities in plain words: needs, giving, debt payments, savings, then wants. Second, set one weekly check-in that is short and calm, so the budget stays a tool, not a judge. Wisdom budgeting is not about control. It is about living in the light, saving for seasons of need. When life feels normal, saving can feel optional. When life feels shaky, saving can feel impossible. Most people do not fight saving because they hate wisdom. They fight it because the present feels loud and the future feels far away. And in that noise, it is easy to confuse peace with spending everything you can touch. Scripture shows a different kind of calm. In Joseph's crisis plan, the good years were not treated like a permanent season. Food was gathered and held back for the 7 years of famine, so the land would not be ruined. Genesis 41:34-36. That story is not about panic. It is about readiness, under authority, with clear limits and clear purpose. Proverbs echoes the same pattern in everyday life. The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. Proverbs 21:20. Saving also connects to responsibility, not just security. Paul tells the church that failing to provide for one's own household is a serious moral problem. 1 Timothy chapter 5:8. That is not permission to worship comfort. It is a call to take practical care seriously. In Scripture, reserves are not a sign of distrust. They can be a form of love with foresight. The modern misuse swings to extremes. One example is scarcity hoarding, where saving becomes a hiding place, and people stop helping even when they can. Another is denial spending, where someone says God will provide while refusing to set aside anything, then blames others when emergencies hit. Both are driven by fear, just wearing different clothing. Begin with one small rule. Save something, even if it is small, before lifestyle rises. Then choose one clear purpose for it, like emergencies or family needs, so it stays a tool instead of a trophy. If you have a simple saving habit, share it in the comments. Planning for family legacy. It is uncomfortable to think about what happens after you are gone. So many people avoid it until the pressure forces the conversation. But avoiding the future does not protect your family. It often leaves them confusion, conflict, and unanswered questions. Legacy is not only what you leave, it is what you prepare. Proverbs speaks with blunt simplicity. A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. Proverbs 13:22. That does not mean every faithful person dies wealthy. It means wisdom looks beyond today's appetite. Paul uses a family principle to explain his care for a church. Parents should save to give to their children. 2 Corinthians chapter 12:14. Even in a spiritual context, the pattern is clear. Mature love carries weight forward. Legacy also requires clean hands. Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Proverbs 13:11. Scripture treats the way money is gained as part of the story you pass down. Not just the amount, not just the image. The path matters. Modern legacy talk can turn shallow. One example is entitlement planning, where parents shield children from all effort, then call it love. Another is fear planning, where parents obsess over control, using money to keep adult children dependent and quiet. Both can sound like provision, but the heart underneath is not peace. Try 2 beginner steps. First, write a simple one-page plan. Who handles what, where the key papers are, and what your priorities are. Second, practice legacy while you are living by teaching one skill, one budget habit, or one giving habit in your home. A legacy is rarely built in one dramatic day. It is built in many ordinary ones. Avoiding debt and presumption. Debt can start as relief. Then it turns into background noise. Then it becomes a quiet leash you feel every time you try to make a decision. That is why debt is not only math, it is also pressure, dependency, and delayed freedom. And it can train your heart to chase comfort now and pay later. Proverbs states the power dynamic without romance. The borrower is slave to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. Paul adds a broad ethical posture. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. Romans 13:8. Jesus also teaches the wisdom of counting before committing, using the picture of sitting down to calculate the cost. Luke 14:28. Together, these passages push against presumption. They call you to honesty before you sign, swipe, or promise. The modern distortion often hides inside normal life. One example is lifestyle borrowing, where debt funds wants that are treated like needs, then generosity and peace get squeezed out. Another is emergency stacking, where someone uses one loan to cover another, not because they are evil, but because they are tired and ashamed. That cycle can feel like survival, yet it often multiplies stress. Start with 2 small steps. First, name your debt clearly, amounts, due dates, and what it was for, without excuses or self-hate. Second, make one no new debt boundary for a set category, even if you cannot clear everything yet. A slower, cleaner path can still be a faithful one. If you are navigating debt pressure, share what feels hardest in the comments. Honesty in earning and business. Most people do not wake up planning to lie. They just start bending. A small excuse here, a hidden fee there, a little padding, a little everyone does it, a little silence when the truth would cost something. And over time, the soul learns a dangerous lesson. That truth is negotiable. Scripture refuses to treat honesty as a minor topic. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. Proverbs 11:1. Proverbs also warns that money gained the wrong way tends to shrink and vanish. Dishonest money dwindles away. Proverbs 13:11. And the New Testament sets the tone for daily work. Whatever you do, work at it with your whole being for the Lord. Colossians chapter 3:23. Honest work is not only about reputation, it is about offering your labor to God without double talk. Today, honesty gets twisted in 2 common ways. One example is smart shortcuts, like misreporting hours, hiding defects, or inflating results to look strong. Another is defensive secrecy, where someone avoids receipts, avoids accountability, and calls it privacy because they fear being questioned. Both habits create fragile foundations. Choose one clear practice. Tell the truth in writing, invoices, terms, and promises, even when it costs you comfort. Then add one simple safeguard, like keeping records, asking questions before agreeing, and giving yourself time to review. Honest money is not always loud, but it is steady, and steadiness is a kind of peace. Some people hear biblical wealth and think it means a clean path upward. Scripture speaks with less glare. It talks about stewardship, diligence, generosity, planning, restraint, honesty, and contentment as daily obedience, not as a scoreboard. Money is not only a resource, it is a revealer. It shows what you trust when you feel pressure, what you chase when you feel empty, and what you protect when you feel threatened. Jesus said, "You cannot serve both God and money because masters compete for the same heart." Matthew chapter 6:24. That means every small decision is a crossroads. Every payment, every purchase, every yes and no can become worship, or it can become surrender to fear. Seeking first the kingdom means you start with God before you start with numbers, and you keep returning when the numbers scare you. Matthew 6:33. It may look like a quiet budget meeting where you refuse to hide. It may look like an apology for a careless promise. It may look like choosing patience over a shortcut or choosing generosity over a flex. If you like our content, consider subscribing. Or if some topics did not make this list, or there are topics you want us to feature, please leave them in the comments. When you practice these principles, ask for wisdom, not hype, because God invites His people to ask. Then walk forward with trust, not superstition, leaning on the Lord instead of your own understanding. Proverbs chapter 3, 5, 6. What would change this week if your next financial decision began with prayer, honesty, and a willing heart?